does Illinois need a tax increase?
Well, there's no question Illinois not only needs a tax increase, Illinois has needed a tax increase for at least 15 or 20 years, probably longer. Now, the bottom line is we have a structural deficit in the honest definition of that term. So every year, revenue growth from our various tax sources is not enough to accommodate the growth and the cost of providing the public services the state provides, even if you are just trying to cover it based on inflation and population growth. You cannot maintain service levels with our current tax system. So over time, that has led them to do some really bad things, borrowing against the pension system, other debt, putting off payments that they owe to providers of human services from one year to the next. All that stuff is a result of a tax system that's inadequate to sustain our spending levels. And here's the kicker. We have the 5th largest population of any state. We have the 5th largest economy. We rank 44th in spending. So we're a low spending state that can't afford its spending. And if people isolate what the state actually spends its general fund money on, 9 out of $10 go to only 4 things. You have education, health care, human services, public safety. So Illinois can't afford to rank 44th out of all the states in funding those 4 core services. You need a tax increase.
If we were to see some of these ideas that have been floated, anything from 1% tax increase to a 2% percentage point increase, how much would, say, like a 2% percentage point increase actually bring in revenue?
Yeah, it brings in just over $5 billion once you've adjusted for things that the state has to fund, like the local government distributive fund and the refund fund. Now, $5 billion goes a long way to solving our problems, and certainly the state ought to increase its income tax level from 3 to 5. Of the 41 states with an income tax, we actually have the lowest rate in the nation. And so bumping it up, we would go up from lowest to 7th lowest in the nation, still one of the lowest income tax rates you could find anywhere. Generates over $5 billion, and that's a real positive. But it won't solve fully their structural problems. To really get the state's books balanced, it needs a revenue enhancement closer to $7.5 billion. I think that's the ballpark that Illinois should be looking at. So in addition to adjusting the income tax, the other flaw we have in our state tax system is the sales tax. I mean, the base only pretty much applies to the sale of goods. That is what we tax, is the sale of goods. Big problem. Way back in 1965, the sale of goods accounted for 32% of all economic activity in Illinois, almost a third. Today, it's less than 12%. That's what we tax. What we don't tax, services, now accounts for over 60% of all economic activity in Illinois. Now, you don't need an economics degree to understand that if you are leaving the largest and fastest growing segment of your economy entirely out of your tax base, you can't balance your books. It's one of the main causes of our structural deficit. So expanding the state sales tax base to include services is also a key component of the reform. And if they did that, and not all services, so you'd leave professional services alone and healthcare services, financial services, you'd really only look at those final consumer services like bowling and lawn care and haircuts, those kinds of things. If you included that in the sales tax base, you'd have another $2.5 billion roughly in revenue that would grow over time because services are the fastest growing segment of the economy, and it would ensure the state would be able to maintain core services. It's an essential reform. And here's the biggest kicker. If Illinois did all this and provided some tax relief to low and middle income families, because my organization has always suggested that once you enhance the revenue side to perform the way it needs to perform in a modern economy, you need to tax people fairly, and Illinois has one of the most unfair taxing systems in the nation because we're so regressive. So you want to include some tax relief that's very much targeted directly to the hardworking middle income and low income families so that they don't have to pay most, if any, of this tax increase. You do all that together, and Illinois can do all that together, we remain one of the lowest taxing states in the nation in the 30s, yet we have a balanced budget. We can pay our pensions, we could pay our providers of human services on time, and in a couple of years, once we get rid of our accumulated deficit, we could actually start enhancing funding for public education. And as everyone probably knows, of the 50 states, Illinois ranks 49th in the portion of school funding provided at the state level.